Hey everybody, welcome to Author Talk, where we are meeting with the authors of Just YA, an open education resource with Oklahoma State University. And these authors have donated their time and their art to teachers and students across the country with this free resource that we can hopefully make it into all the hands and hearts and minds of students across the country. And today we are joined by Emanuel Xavier, who's going to share with us a couple of the poems that are in the book, the anthology Just YA. So welcome. Thanks so much for being here. Hey, there it is. I still have mine as like the proof on it. I don't have the
Oh,
new one yet.
it's a
So can you
beautiful
tell us like
book.
where you are in the world? Tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. So I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York. I still live in New York in the Staten Island area. And my background as a poet, as a writer is, something worth a film. I was kicked out at 16 for coming out as gay, and I was homeless out on the streets and survived. And I discovered poetry after working at a gay bookstore and fell in love with spoken word and have been doing that ever since. So now work in publishing, and I've been writing for several decades and performing across the country and across the world. And I'm very happy to be part of this specifically because I always wanted my work to reach, a younger generation. Um,
Thank you so much. Do you know how we got connected?
I don't recall.
I think I reached out to you. I think I emailed you. Um,
How did you
yeah,
discover me?
I think I was searching for poets. I was searching um for poets who wrote or authors broadly who wrote short form like flash fiction. And I wanted to really be intentional about making sure this book had broad representation and spoke to students from all over the country and all different ways of being. And that your work celebrated and spoke in such beautiful ways to our queer youth, and that you so openly share about your culture as well. I think like it puts into conversation all these ways of being and land and loving in the world, that this as a collection, it speaks to students who are looking for themselves on the page and students who have an exaggerated sense of their self-importance because they've always been on the page.
Mm.
And when they can turn and see something new on the page, we want that. And when we can see themselves on the page, we want that too. And so I read some of your poems and I saw your spoken word and I thought, okay, I'm just going to ask. I'm just going to ask if you'll share something. And I'm so glad that you were responsive. And that's the other part, like working with authors who are kind and generous and nice. When we know that already, there's not a lot of money involved in publishing and writing. So to ask for something for free is not easy. And but in response, or the best I can do is putting all these voices together and make it free for teachers. And so that you responded was everything to me.
No, absolutely. And it's so important because I wish there was something like this when I was, a teen, so that at least I wouldn't have felt alone. And that's why I started writing and sharing my work. And, a lot of my work has been very intense and, political and, you know, but I've done events with high school students, where I've been able to tone down my work. I have selections or pieces that work for that audience, and to be able to share them, in this collection, with students and teachers across the country is essential and it's important.
Well, I would love for you to read something. What would you like to read first?
Um, so the first poem I'm going to share is a poem which I saw a video of you performing and I thought was fantastic. And I love seeing other interpretations of this because, it brings the words to life, and it shows that our work, even though we're all different, can be universal because, it touches everyone, the readers, differently. So, but this is Stepfather.
Okay.
He forgets that he used to call me mariconcito, that I harbored years of hatred toward him while hoping to find my real father. My childhood memories of him reminding me I was my mother's son, not his. I tried to poison him once and scattered sharp nails inside the shoes in his closet. By the time one of his sons died of AIDS, I was already lost in contempt for the man I blamed for everything. There was a time I was in love and he met my boyfriends. Now he forgets to go to the bathroom or where he is. I help him walk slowly outdoors to step outside the prison cell that is a tiny apartment with no windows in which I grew up abused by both of them. He barely understands. His fate has been torture. I know that I cannot be his savior. I used to pray for him to die, but here he is slowly fading. In his eyes, I see that he learned to love me and wishes he could take it all back. He is unable to recall those drunken nights and hateful words. I should do the same. I left a long time ago, but he still remains haunted with a little boy who wanted to belong. Like him, I want to forget that we made mistakes and caused so much pain. I need for both of us to remember how he taught me how to ride a bike and how to swim, and told me, better late than never, that he loved me and was proud of all I had done. I have to help him settle into his favorite chair and let him know that I forgive him. There is a place somewhere where he will call me hijo, and I will know him as my dad.
Thank you so much for sharing that. As you reread that out loud, I know you have a lot of experience with spoken word and readings. What feels new to you, or what sort of strikes you in this moment rereading it?
Um, I, I always get emotional when I read this particular poem, especially in front of an audience. But there are different parts of the poem which remind me why I wrote it. And what this poem is essentially about is forgiveness. Forgiveness, accepting who you are and forgiving, someone who has hurt you. Um, because life is short, and that's all we have.
Yeah. I think when I think about, like, as a teacher sharing this with students, and um the moves that you make in here as a writer, I want students to read the poems, but I also want them to read them and think, I can say something too,
Hmm.
that your poem can be a mentor for their work, you know,
Yeah,
and imitating little some of the craft moves that you make here that make it poetic and that make it so beautiful, that they can do with their own story or with something else.
absolutely. Absolutely. It's all about inspiring and encouraging people to speak up and speak their truths.
Mhm.
Because for me, poetry has been very healing, and hopefully, that's what I try to inspire in others.
Yeah. And I think, like, the other part that's important to me when I'm selecting poems to share with students as a whole, or when I can, like, kind of stand behind, handing it over to a student and not worried about the political pieces of it, is that you take good care of the reader.
Hmm.
And I want to say that to students too when they're writing their poetry, which can be, very emotive sometimes, and they can write it for themselves, but if they're sharing it with a classmate or something, it can have a lot of anger and hurt in it. But if we're going to share it with someone else, we also want to take care of the reader and leave them with something. And you do take such good care of us as you move toward the end with forgiveness, and you sort of circle back to the beginning of, um, settling him into his favorite chair, right? And it's not, I feel like when I'm thinking about this and, like, the parents who have harmed us, um, that it's not absolving of the pain or the harm for them. But
Hmm.
there's this doing it for you in a way.
Yeah. And I always say that, like, whether you choose to write a poem that you just want to write into a journal and never share it with anyone, or something that you dare to speak in front of an audience, that's the power in poetry. It's that it's a way, it's a means of expression, We all need some sort of a creative outlet, whether that be dance or music or poetry. It's important to be able to heal and share those experiences, whether it's for yourself or for others.
Yeah, I love it. Will you share another poem?
Absolutely. Um, so this next poem is called Runaway, and it goes like this. There is a world out there where I belong, loved by a mother and father who understand my dreams, who listen to my fears of my older cousin, his touch, or how boys make fun of me in school. There's a world out there where I can grow up to love myself and others like me, where soft-spoken boys can speak boldly. I will call it poetry, each memory an inspiration. All this pain, these dismembered and abandoned cars, these empty lots left behind where I know deep in my heart that there's innocence in playing with dolls, reaching for rainbows, books, even mommy's pretty dresses. I will not be alone in this world. I have somewhere to run. I do not know exactly where. I have no maps or stars to guide me through the night. If it turns out that this is my world, maybe I should simply learn to laugh and live and let the others catch up to me instead.
Hmm. Okay, I'm going to ask you again this. Yeah, I mean, it's just beautiful to hear you read it and and tell it. Like I can feel it coming from you. But what kind of stands out for you as you read through this again?
Um, the way I felt when I wrote that poem, and the hope that I wanted to provide for myself and for others, and the self-acceptance and the self-awareness, and you know um knowing that it's important to love yourself, and let others love you, and you sort of find your family, you know like with friends, and you know with others in the world around you that accept you for who you are.
This poem is in like the book is divided into different sections of love, land, world, futures, and being. And this poem we put in the love section um, for the self-love for me. Like
Hmm.
it can go in a lot of different places. It can go into being and, and place as well. But I love this in the love section for the self-love and that this is just like I almost, as terrible as it sounds, I would almost want to force every student to write a self-love poem. As hard as
Hmm.
it is, like it's just impossible. I remember we were writing poems about the prompt was sort of like write about your best part, and I couldn't write it. I had to write about my worst, and then somehow in writing through that, it turned into my best. But it was like claiming that for myself and claiming some self-love, but how difficult it is for our students, our teens to name the love and to say that they love themselves. I just think this poem is perfect for inviting that sort of reflection.
Yeah, yeah. At that age, we experience a lot coming at us from all directions, and it's important to find a place, a space for yourself, you know, where you know you can love yourself.
That's beautiful. Well, I know you're working on quite a few things. You're very busy. I follow you on the social media, especially Facebook. I love seeing all the things that you're doing. So teachers, you can follow Emmanuel on Facebook and see all the great things. Also, and what's even more beautiful, I think, is how you uplift other poets and authors in your work. You're always like connecting us to other, and I found like I'm getting books and reading other poets because of you. So what are you working
Fantastic.
on?
Um, I am currently working on a screenplay based on a novel that I wrote back in 1999 called Christ-like. And going to be at the Dodge Poetry Festival this coming weekend for the first time ever. And I have a lot of other events that I'm working on, and potentially working on a memoir, which is totally new for me after writing poetry. Um, it's a whole different creature, but if I can tackle a screenplay, I can tackle a memoir. So yes, and there's other poetry. I mean, I just wrote a new poem recently for an event to promote, to encourage, our youth to vote. So, there's always a reason to write another poem,
Mhm.
and who knows where those will end up.
I want to just go back just to a couple sentences ago. What is your approach to starting a different form? Like if you're gonna write the screenplay, do you like read a bunch of screenplay first, or does it start in a poem and turn into a screenplay and then moving into prose? Like, how do you do that? I'm just really interested in like the craft of that.
Oh, it's completely different. When I'm writing poetry, I try to read as much as possible, and you know, I'll get inspired by, a poem, and it's okay. Like I've done workshops with students where I'm like, it's okay to use a poem as a template to do your own poem, because I didn't have a formal education in poetry, so I know the differences between writing, like the structure and the haiku and what
Mhm.
is this or that. So, but writing a screenplay was a whole different creature for me. I actually worked closely with another author, Christopher Bram, on, how to put that together. And a memoir is a whole nother thing also. You have fiction writers included in this collection. So it's more about getting the work done, about just writing it, and then going back to to, to making corrections and so on. But poetry is, it's a little bit more, compact than writing a memoir, whereas writing a memoir is like you have to be as descriptive as possible and create the world around you, which you do in poetry too, but with less words.
Yeah. Yeah, good. Well, thanks for that little meta lesson about
I don't know if it was a
writing.
lesson, but that's my take on it.
Yeah, it's good. Well, I think like as English language arts teachers, like we are tasked with like with having our students, or nurturing our students through writing a lot of different forms, and we are not experts in all of them. Like we're not writing them all either. Like I only started writing poetry because the students were writing poetry, and I felt like I had to figure it out for myself. Or if we write flash fiction, I write flash fiction because I got to figure it out too. So a screenplay is another thing. I've never written a screenplay. I'd love for my students to write a screenplay, so I have to figure out how to do that. And so I love again this collection because it has different forms and
Mhm.
of writing that we can show our students that it doesn't all have to be a 5 paragraph essay. It's not that what we
Yes.
do.
Yeah. And then the other beautiful thing about like poetry is that poetry is for everyone. That's why I was so inspired to become a poet, because, I appreciate the works of Shakespeare and a lot of our classical poets, but I learned that poetry is so much more, that, there's no real right or wrong. It's all about, expression. And yes, you can write a beautiful poem about, like, nature, but it's also beautiful to be able to write a poem about, the world around you.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I have really enjoyed meeting you and having this conversation. Is there anything else you'd like to
Likewise.
say before we close?
Yes, just definitely, to all the students out there, continue writing, continue sharing your truths, and we need to hear your voices. We need to learn about your experiences in the world around you. So,
Okay, thank you so much. Great to be with you.
thanks. Great to be with you too.